Hi, I'm Lindy Antonelli. I head up Armanino's Cloud Technology Solutions Business Development Practice, and I chair the Controllers Council Board of Advisors. Thank you for attending. A few housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees will receive a copy of the deck after the webcast. We encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar control panel. Check the Controllers Council site for upcoming events and a recording of this event. And we have a couple of handouts in the GoToWebinar tool on your control panel. Feel free to click and download. Now, the title of our webcast today is You Survived 2020, How to Thrive in 2021. There is no doubt that 2020 has challenged all of our businesses, but you have survived. Now, let's talk about how you will thrive in 2021 and beyond. One key will be developing a long-term strategy to rebuild and grow in an ever-evolving business and economic environment. Our experts will discuss how you can best utilize people, process, and technology to build a strategy to allow your organization to achieve sustainable, profitable, long-term growth. You will also hear about navigating the tax landscape in the coming years ahead. First, about our firm, Armanino. We are a top 25 CPA and consulting firm and the strategic business partner to the finance organization. Now, about our panelists. Ryan Prindiville wears many hats as a partner at Armanino, heading up our strategy and transformation, data analytics, and solution architecture practice areas. And Jerry Clancy is a partner in our tax practice. Welcome, guys, my fellow partners and esteemed panelists today. If you could please say hello and a few words about yourself, and then we'll get right to our discussion today.
Thanks for having us, Lindy. I appreciate it, and happy to be here. Like you said, Ryan Prindiville here. I've been a partner with Armanino for not quite, and I've been with the firm for not quite 6 years now. Long history in balancing the line between technology and management consulting and helping clients and so forth in many different ways. Spent the first half of my career on the client side, and second half of the year on the dark side in the consulting space. And happy to share any thoughts and examples from a long history of walking that line for clients today.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Good.
Thanks for joining.
I was having some technical difficulties, so I'm on now. So
great. Well, if you'd like to say a few words about yourself, and then we'll get right to our discussion here.
Sure. Jerry Clancy. I'm a tax partner at Armanino, and I lead our firm's national privately held business tax group across the country, and work a tremendous amount with various types of companies, whether they be technology or manufacturing or distributing companies. And I guess, I do a fair amount of sort of general advisory with respect to those, not just tax. So I guess they wanted me on this call because maybe I have a little bit of an insight into how sort of business owners are, navigating through this crisis.
Great. Well, thank you both. Your wealth of experience and your knowledge will go a long way to our audience today. So thank you for that. If you can move to the next slide, we've got just an overview. Ryan's going to take a few minutes and tell us a little bit more about our technology solutions practice area.
So it's funny that the topic for today is you survived 2020 and how to thrive in 2021, and a lot of the comments and topics might be around digital transformation. So we thought it would be important to think about some of the things that Armanino brings to the table from our technology solutions capabilities. And we're a full service firm. We do have tax, audit, consulting. Our consulting business has both the combination of advisory consulting as well as technology consulting solutions. It includes things like ERP, CRM, financial close, helping you streamline that financial close, helping you think through FP&A and how do you do a better job of forecasting and planning, which is especially important in these crazy times, being able to reforecast and replan quickly and accurately. And then how do you integrate all these solutions and think through and position your team for the future? And then maybe more importantly today is the concept of broad data analytics. How do you have the right reporting, the right automation, the right capabilities for pushing your business and all your peers on the operations side, the sales side, the marketing side, to have the data that you can all rely on and trust together at the same time?
Yeah, they're all intertwined, and you know, please feel free, audience, to reach out to any one of us if you need more information on any of these services. So now on to our fireside chat. There we go. So great, Ryan. I'll start off with you. What exactly is digital transformation, and really, how has that definition changed over the years? How is it relevant today?
You know, it's funny. You'll see a lot of different definitions out there, and historically, you know, I think people thought of digital transformation maybe as just leveraging technology and updating legacy systems and so forth historically, but really what we're seeing now is the concept of digital transformation has broadened out, right? And where we talk about it, and you simply, it might be things as simple as moving your systems out of the closet and off premise into the cloud, right? But it could be maybe a more broader topic that encompasses people, process, and technology, and thinking about how are we enabling your people with the right tools, the right capabilities to allow them to do their job more effectively, to service your customers, you know, more quickly with relevant information and services, and maybe it could even be a step further around, are you positioned to leverage your internal data as an asset, to rethink your operations, to push your organization forward, and maybe position yourself for the changes and the craziness that's going on in the world today. So I think the definition, to your point, Lindy, maybe has broadened and you know, faster than it has narrowed recently.
Right, Jerry. Any thoughts there on digital transformation? What you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to get into it with really the next question about, you know, companies and various, you know, that have had various reactions to the pandemic in terms of their financial performance, and I'll share kind of what my experience has been talking to the business owners and CFOs and controllers about, you know, transformation and its consequences to them now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I think a little bit about the definition too, I mean, meaning it could be as broad as encompassing things like, what is your digital strategy? Do you have a customer engagement strategy? Have you done things on the front end of your business to enable and bring your customers closer to you? Anything from you know, automating business portals and invoicing and these types of things up front, to back end, meaning have you done the legacy work around doing data cleanup and leveraging or looking at things like robotic process automation. I know, Lindy, I think you guys had a session last month with the Controllers Council on automation as well. That could be considered a component of a digital transformation strategy, right? It's not the end all be all. It is a component of a strategy. But then you look at now more advanced topics like artificial intelligence and blockchain and those kind of things. You might consider those as part of your overall strategy. But it doesn't have to be that complex, right? You can start with simple, like with understanding your existing processes. What are your teams doing today, and how can we streamline and simplify it using cloud-based tools? That could be a simple starting point.
Yep, that's a good explanation. Yeah, kind of moving to our next question, Jerry, that you really brought up, and so the way you know, you described it to me, and is that you're seeing like 3 categories of businesses, that how they're falling into right now. Those are doing well, they're faring well. Those that are about the same, even keel, and then of course those that are struggling to stay afloat. What does digital transformation look like for each of those categories? Maybe you guys can, Jerry, you can start, and Ryan, you can chime in.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I have just a layman's knowledge of what all goes into digital transformation, but the experiences that the clients have expressed in each one of those categories leads into that, because, you know, I've got, and Ryan and I have some joint clients where, you know, quite frankly, their revenue exploded and their revenue opportunities exploded as a result of the pandemic, oddly enough. And so this was, this one example is a food processing company where, they're fairly large, several hundred million in size, but they actually had an opportunity to probably double or perhaps triple their revenue. And, interestingly, we had started engaging in a discussion with them a year or two ago, probably 2 years ago, actually, to basically, do an assessment of where they were at in their business transformation process. And quite frankly, this is a very, very successful company that was somewhat, antiquated in its systems and processes and so forth. And it was a little bit like, if it isn't broke, why fix it? That kind of an attitude. This has always worked for us. And so we did convince them to do an assessment, which resulted in about 145 recommendations.
Wow.
But they sort of were moving at like a glacial pace towards that. And so suddenly this pandemic hits and they get these major opportunities to double or triple their revenue. And they unfortunately really couldn't capitalize on much of it. And so, that's an example of a company that, is doing, extremely well, but really didn't have the infrastructure to really capitalize on the opportunity. Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think your three buckets, Lindy, make a lot of sense. If you think about how and where companies are right now, there are companies that are doing well. There are companies that are doing about the same, right? Coming out of where this crazy 2020 that we've been in, right? And then there are companies that are struggling to stay afloat. And so when I think about that, I think Jerry's example is interesting because it's sort of bucket one and sort of bucket two, where they're technically very successful, but they also probably could have doubled down and done even better if they had heeded some advice and acted on some of the digital transformation roadmap a year ago instead. So when we talk about companies that are doing well and they already have that digital transformation roadmap, really the advice and the plan for them is to stay the course and accelerate the plan, right? Don't stop, accelerate the plan, because the chances are you're going to not just, and if you don't focus on just the internal, but also the client and customer engagement and enabling your team through that digital transformation, you might be able to outpace the competition during this crazy time. And that was the example where Jerry is. We really wanted to see clients take advantage of opportunities where they can outpace their competition. That's where we get the most value out of our daily interactions. Where do we help enable our clients to take advantage of those opportunities?
Yeah, and I think that I have clients that were in the opposite scenario where, let's just call it, they were in the hospitality business. One case, restaurants, very, very successful, and then sort of an unmitigated disaster, right? And so then, in some sense, the digital transformation and the transformation services in general became a critical factor in their outright survival. And so, in that case, it was an existential need. And, again, quite frankly, that's where some of these types of services could make the difference between their survival or not surviving.
Well, I think you're right, Jerry. I think that fits into that, bucket number 3, the kind of the reposition to stay alive bucket, right? Mm-hmm. Like the only way we're going to succeed is if we do more with less in a lot of ways. We may not be able to afford to have as many people doing the same amount of work or doing it in the same way, or knowing that the complexity is going to increase or the volatility is going to increase. And we don't know that the volatility we've seen this year isn't going to continue for some period of time, right? That craziness of big ups and down swings may continue for some time. So how do we position ourselves to be as flexible as possible, to do more with less in a lot of ways, and to automate all non-essential functions, right? And maybe to even automate customer engagements. And the restaurants in your example, and even fitness centers and even hospitality have had to, the ones that have digitized fast and have made their operations digital, made their teams remote, be able to operate remote, made their teams be able to handle and engage with clients online through menus, change their services maybe even, or restaurants turned into grocery stores in a lot of cases during COVID. Maybe they changed and operated differently in the future, offered new types of services. We've had clients, leverage this time to reposition for the future as well and say, hey, we may be empty as a hospitality provider, but how can we leverage this time to reposition for a new kind of future in 2021 and beyond, right? And position, maybe we don't need to operate in the exact same model we did before. Maybe we can change it and improve and have better data to improve our forecasting, to make better packages, make better offers to clients by knowing what it is that we can and do well, right? And so that kind of fits into that bucket number 2, which was some companies are doing all right, but if they had invested earlier, they might even be doing better, right?
No question.
And so that's that kind of, so there you kind of have those 3 buckets, and the reality is those 3 buckets are not by company size, they're not by company industry, they're across sizes and across industries based on how and where they invested to be able to be flexible given all the crazy complexity in the world.
Yep. Good conversation. I've got another question here for you guys, and it's more of a topic of, if some companies started, let's say in 2019, started doing digital transformation. I mean, we've been doing this at Armanino for over 6 years. You've worked with clients over the past years. What does it look like for companies that have already started down this path? Excuse me, did they make changes? Are they staying the course? Did you have to course correct? How did that look like?
I mean, I think the honest answer is yes, and all of the above. And I say that I've said that tongue in cheek this year a lot of times as kind of the typical consultant answer, right? It's all of the above. And I say that being self-aware that we do see companies and clients in all of those boats, Lindy. And I think that what we see is the ones that did start the digital transformation in 2019 or before were probably better positioned in 2019 to deal with waking up on March 16th and saying, my world just changed, what am I going to do? And this isn't going to be the last time. It's not the first time that we've had to deal with crazy political, socioeconomic, pure economic, social change, tech change. We're going to continue to see things like that hit the business world in years to come, and it may accelerate, not decelerate the pace of that pace. So the ones that already started that transformation, they might have been better enabled to have their employees work from home in March. They might have been better positioned to deal with the cyber criminals that took advantage of the situation and tried to start targeting players because all their systems were in the cloud. They weren't in a closet locked down with no security on them, right? They might have been better positioned with processes that were somewhat automated that would allow for flexible change quickly versus only being done in a paper route when you're in the office and those kind of things, right? So those are things that we definitely did see. And so the ones that accelerated coming into 2020 with that are probably the ones that are going to continue to do better in 2021 as the pace of change accelerates. Jerry?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think it's I think the remote working arrangement is just a perfect example of those companies that were ready to do that on a moment's notice, saw incredible advantages, and those that were not set up to do that, it was a real struggle to process transactions and etc. So it really demonstrated kind of the need for always using best practices, if you will, and what's thinking down the road in terms of what's coming and how do we position ourselves as a company to take advantage of those efficiencies.
Right.
True. In my business, as you guys know, and a lot of our members know, that I head up our Sage Intacct business development area. And, I've been saying for years, but it's so much more true today and for the next 5 years is, I ask the clients, or they might say, can I afford to do this? Can I afford to move to the cloud? Can I afford to put Intacct in? I say, can you afford not to?
Right. Lindy, I think that's a really good point. And I think the can you afford not to is more relevant now than it ever has been, right? It was relevant 2 years ago, honestly, and the ROI was there. I think now more than ever, the reality is that if you haven't started thinking about your technology as a catalyst for change, as a catalyst for enabling you to work in new business models in new ways, as a catalyst for driving flexibility in your organization, as a catalyst for allowing you to deal with the next big event that's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? And it could be geo-local, it could be people local, it could be political, it could be any of those things. And are you positioned as a business to handle that change? And we see that affect companies' profitability for sure. We see it affect their ability to execute, but we also see it affect things like valuations, right? If you're looking to take investment or be acquired or do anything else like that, Jerry and I both work with a lot of fast-growing, high-growth companies that may be looking to invest or sell equity stakes or potentially sell the business at some point as well. Your valuation is also dependent on your ability to deal with the crazy change that's going on in the world, right? And I think that is table stakes now. So your comment is really relevant, Lindy.
Yeah, I think like I have some clients in the oil and gas arena, which is historically a pretty archaic from a process control standpoint. And talking to one business owner in that arena, he basically believes that the business transformation aspect of it could make the difference between, in all competitive environments in the future, and those that are not doing it essentially get knocked out of the box. And so it is a critical part of his plan for the future and survival.
So, yeah, so, we're talking about, can you afford not to, but, what happens if you've waited? And, what can you do here in 2021? What gives you a better chance for success coming up here? We're right around the corner from 2021.
In my view, if you have waited, now's the time to act. And I guess that you could say that, oh, that's the consultant guy talking again, right? Saying that. But the reality is that the cost of using technology as a catalyst has decreased significantly. There are proven models there to leverage in just about every industry, even in maybe, like Jerry said, some of the more traditional, slow industries and spaces that are slower to adopt change in technology, whether it be nonprofits, whether it be real estate and deal-oriented businesses, right? Whether it be some of the very traditional energies and utilities and so forth, whether it be privately held manufacturing businesses. It doesn't have to be just tech companies that are accelerating into the change now. That we see the transformation working. Digital transformation, adoption of technology, adoption of process change, adoption of automating and simplifying for your team members, working in all of those kind of more traditional, maybe laggard type industries as well. And so, you can wait, but that means that your competitors or your peer companies are probably accelerating around you, is the reality, right?
And when it comes to valuations, I can tell you for a fact that the private equity companies, when they identify, let's say, a traditional business, but let's just say that traditional business has some really interesting AI technology-based advantage, they find that very attractive from a valuation standpoint. Those are the companies that they're wanting to invest in, and you're going to get the higher valuations simply because you're already a thought leader in that industry from a process automation technology standpoint.
So you can certainly delay. A delay is it's always an option, right? And so we're not gonna pretend that it's not. I think that I've heard clients say, oh, well, wait till after the inauguration. Like there's a magic thing that's going to happen at the end of January that's going to make everything smooth again, or they're going to wait till vaccines release, or they're going to wait till they're smooth. There's going to be a next bump around the bend, right? There's always something next. And so I think what we're saying is that even if you're not making a big technology investment, there are things you can do to prepare yourself, to position yourself to better take advantage of that digital transformation? You know, have you looked at your people and say, do we have the people in the right roles and right types and right responsibilities and enabled to function at what's going to happen next year, right? Have we even thought through that and kind of assess that situation? You know, what did we do right and wrong this last year, and what can we do better next year? Did we think about just our processes? Where do we hit a wall in March and April and June? And if something else happens in March, April, and June next year, are we positioned now to better work around that, to enable it? And then are there things that we can do incrementally? Maybe it's not a big bang approach. Are there incremental changes that we can make to automate certain processes, to simplify certain areas, to take that one manual task that everybody's doing in Excel and passing around an Excel spreadsheet for the close or for your planning and forecasting, and put and simplify and automate that in a platform or tool to enable you then to free up enough time to focus on the big things you have to do next, right?
So instead of having it as a static document, it's a continuously updating document. And I mean, even within our own firm, what we've kind of learned internally is that we're seeing a more distributed workforce throughout the country, and what a pleasant surprise is that's worked extraordinarily well. And so as we start looking for talent, we're looking nationwide in places that we never looked before, because it really doesn't matter in many cases where that person decides to live. And the thing to remember is that the people that have moved to other parts of the country, they kind of like it there, and they don't really plan on moving back to the big cities. And so I mean, coming up with technology-based applications where you can monitor their performance, you can make sure they're working. I mean, all the different things that are out there. We're interviewing folks now in places that we never even dreamed of, and it's because what we're after is the best talent. And we used to think that we had to have the best talent in a certain locality, and we've learned we don't. So this is and also your travel and entertainment costs of people traveling from engagement to engagement. Well, now the clients, can sort of, they're okay with remote, workers as far as, firm service delivery. And so it reduces travel costs. I mean, there's just all these sort of unintended benefits of all of this that if you recognize them and analyze them, you can really capitalize.
Jerry, you just called out something that I think is probably two of the most important things to think about coming out of this crazy 2020 that we've been in. One is there are positive things that we have learned in this environment, right? And that one positive thing is that there are things that we have learned to do as a society that are better. We don't always have to be on a plane to get work done, right? We don't have that we can hire people in remote places and have them be productive members of our teams and so forth. And so one of the things that I think is a critical thing about digital transformation, and Lindy's first question was, how has it evolved over time, right? What is digital transformation and how has it evolved? I think what's evolved the most is that digital transformation is less about the technology. It is about the people, right?
Right.
The people in your firm, your organization, and your clients. And what are you doing to enable them to be successful? And when we think about people in your organization, one of the things that's actually, I think, changed the most is recruiting and retention. I do believe that going into 2021 and beyond, that the ways that our clients recruit and retain team members will be fundamentally different than they were in prior years. I do believe that there are going to be changes that if your firm is not somewhat digital, if you do not enable your employees in certain ways, if you do not have tools and processes to allow employees to work remotely, to have all the comforts of being in the office, to have things that make their lives easier, I do believe that recruiting and retention will be harder. The next generations of employees are looking for organizations that have gone through that digital transformation or are going to enable them. So if the firms that are still in kind of the backwoods eras and are not transforming are probably not likely to be able to recruit the best talent. So that's another element of positioning yourself for the future.
Right. I mean, you know, there's a three-pronged approach here to digital transformation. And as you guys have been saying, it's people, it's process, and it's technology. I think you just did a really good job talking about the people, both of you guys. We've talked a lot about the technology already, but what about processes? You know, how are companies looking at inefficient processes and the lack of automation? How are they prioritizing these inefficiencies to put together their roadmap? Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we would talk about processes, and immediately half the audience is going to go to sleep, right? Because we talk about things like process engineering, and you talk about simplifying, taking out steps, and so forth. But the reality is, nobody wants to do boring stuff, right? Nobody on the team wants to do that tedious minutia that makes life harder, right? And so if we think about what's going on, and I just got to notice that my webcam is slow here, so if I'm losing you, then let me know.
Well, I mean, it's a simple thing in the accounting department, right? We're an accounting firm, is 1099 processing.
Right. And 1099 processing is a perfect example. And so we found ways to both build automation and RPA to simplify that, and we can outsource that for firms and take it off the case. We also can do things like anomaly detection. Look for those things that are goofing you up in your financial close, and use automation to not, so you don't have to dig through all the spreadsheets yourself to find that 2 or 3 things that are goofing up your close. We can also do things like automate all those Excel-driven or email-driven tasks, or searching, use tools to search through all your AR and find the patterns and what's goofing up your AR at the end of the month as well. Those are all common things that we're working with clients every day to automate, to free people up to focus on more important processes, right? Like planning for the future.
Right, exactly. Yep, all good points. And, you know, I guess what I see in my business area and with my clients is, you know, building the case, putting the ROI together, and, you know, maybe aligning this strategy of, you know, the improving on the processes with you know, the ROI type factors. For instance, RPAs, robotic process automation. We talked about that last month. We had a webcast on that, you know, a few weeks ago. But taking, you know, those types of technologies and deploying them with a very, very low cost, high ROI, and you know, putting some numbers to it that our large audience here, our controllers, can take to the CFO and the boards and say, I can prove an ROI on some of this stuff. Yeah.
Well, I think what you just said is really important, and it's something that not all firms do well. Not all of our clients do well. Is make a case to the board or to the exec team. Why are we doing these changes, right? Because change just for the sake of change is not always good. It can be painful, right? Whether it's implementing new technology or changing a process, taking the way somebody has done something for the last 5, 10, 15 or more years and changing it for no reason is not good. But showing that individual and executives that we're going to change, we're going to spend $20,000, $50,000, whatever the thing is, to free those 3 people up and save a couple $100,000, but maybe more importantly, enable us to pursue a new business activity, or to complete a transaction, or to acquire that next business, or to launch a new product. Those are all parts of an ROI model that maybe not everybody takes into account, right? Some people just look at, I take these 3 hours out of a process, but really the value is, what are you enabling the firm to do?
What I found amazing is, you know, being, again, a non-technology guy, is I've attended some of your presentations in terms of the recommendations to clients, and, you know, quite frankly, walking in, I'm like, well, you know, what more can they really do here? This thing looks pretty dialed in. And then I'm kind of blown away by stuff that I didn't even dream of in terms of like what the benefits were of some of the process changes. And so were the clients, quite frankly, because it's a little bit like a golf swing. It's tough to know how your own golf swing looks, right? So, you know, I think having a set of eyes come in that are focused on future technologies I have found that the clients have absolutely been blown away by what you guys have come up with.
Well, I think to Lindy's points, I think having building out an ROI model for why would you do a business transformation or a digital transformation, and what are the components of it and the value of the different components, and showing the impact of them on the business. It is a bit like having maybe a corporate psychiatrist or a corporate psychologist, right? Guide you through, maybe let you talk through some of the challenges you might be facing, and not realizing that you have the power to change them yourself, but then giving you some coaching on and mechanisms for how you can get better, right? And that is a lot of what we do when we do these kind of ROI building, assessments and roadmaps, and drive to what a digital transformation strategy is. And the reality is, a lot of times that intelligence and that knowledge resides within our client's environment, and we work to help to expose that, right, and bring it to light, and help build a model to get everybody on the same page to talk about the incremental changes they can make to achieve that digital transformation.
Yep, all good topics. We talk about technology, and maybe that kind of bleeds into tech companies and how tech companies could benefit most. But we've seen, and Ryan and Jerry, you guys can attest to this, that more traditional mainstream companies, manufacturing, distribution, and not-for-profits can really benefit as well. I think our Controllers Council industries, just we're across so many industries. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how non-tech companies can benefit.
Jerry gave a good example of a food and beverage company, and that's just one. But we've worked with probably with several tons of food and beverage companies. And that's a good example because the world has really changed in that space. It's a pretty traditional industry. In manufacturing, merchandising, distribution, delivery, very traditional functions that have been around and haven't changed a whole lot for many years. However, what you see is that there's usually a lot of opportunity in those places to make it even better, to leverage technology, to leverage the same topics that we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes, to improve and streamline those processes and enable the teams to do things differently. That's a really common area. Things like nonprofits, Lindy, you mentioned it. Nonprofits have been really crunched in the last year, right? People when people get scared, they don't give as much in a lot of cases. That's unfortunately that's the case. So
right.
How do nonprofits that maybe have issues, all they're trying to do is deliver their programs, right? Deliver their services, their programs out to their constituencies, whatever theirs, maybe their foundation that makes grants, but do they have the right tools and process to understand what are their donors doing? Where are their donors? How are they doing? Do they have the analytics on what to do with it? Do they have the tools to make sure that their programs are the most effective and operating effectively, right? And then how do they account for them, but not have to have the same 3 people doing it in the office, 24/7? Maybe those people can free up time to be focused on some of the future versus the past, and figuring out where to leverage or improve the programs versus the backwards view, right? And the reporting. I mentioned real estate before. If you think about what's gone on in what's going on in construction services, and or some of the other sub niches there, what's going on in property management, and what's going on with our developers. These are in places where technology has not been always adopted well historically, but now we're seeing an opportunity to leverage and improve those greatly. The ability to invest has changed. The focus from technology vendors has changed significantly. We're seeing it with a lot of our partners, that there is a lot of opportunity to increase and optimize with relatively low pain thresholds now. So you're seeing it in all those spaces, Lindy.
Yeah, so it's cross industry, it's cross company size, it's cross everything. So lots going on there. Wanted to actually get a couple things from you guys. I want to have you tell our controllers and our other folks here, what are some tips to kind of get started, and how do they kind of start the digital transformation process? And then we're going to jump over to Jerry and do talk about the Biden tax law.
That's great. I mean, and I think Jerry does a good job of this too. Is what's going on with controllers specifically? I would say, do you have a collaboration strategy? Are you talking to your peers outside of your core accounting team to understand where their pain points are in the business?
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking to operations and to marketing and to sales and to other players and understanding what those pain points are and thinking through what could we do differently together, right? And it sounds silly.
Controllers can really shine.
Controllers to talk to people outside their main function is hard.
Right.
I hate to say it, it's true.
Yeah, our controllers here, our members, can really shine if they step up and take some of this leadership initiative and start collaborating with their counterparts in the other departments and areas. I think that's a great idea.
So that's number one. I mean, number two might be, thinking through, do you have the right team members thinking through? And so now you've collaborated, you started talking about what are some of the challenges we're facing. Do you have people internally that you can talk to and think through what should we be doing next, right? Do you have a set of, there's a phrase that may take the wrong political context, but it's, the coalition of the willing, right? Is, do you have people who are like mindset, who are in the mindset that we do need to change? Because the reality is, whether it's a people change, it's a process change, or technology change, you can't do it alone, and you're gonna need people. And those people may be your peers and players inside the firm and other departments, but it may also be your third parties. It could be an Armanino, but it could be your other advisors as well.
When I think of a controller, a lot of times the controller has interfaces these other departments, operations, et cetera, more than anybody, more than the CFO, more than the CEO, more than
right.
And are in a kind of a unique position to look, because everybody knows what the model that they have is, but the question really is, what's the model of the future? In other words, is the model of running their business today the right model for the future? And I really believe that a controller is in a unique position to be able to sort of facilitate with the other departments that new model with the assistance of someone that really understands the futuristic technologies.
Well, yeah, and we've talked about it for years. We have a framework called the CFO Evolution Framework, and I actually believe it's more important to the controller now than to the CFO. I think in many cases, our client organizations, the CFOs have done some transformation in terms of their role over the last years, and now the controller has the need to really think about how do they free up the time and focus on the future as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good comment.
And if anybody wants a copy of the CFO Evolution Framework, I'm sure we'd be willing to reach out and send that out to anybody.
Yep. Just let me know, and I will make sure you get a copy of it. It's also on our website. I'm going to switch over to Jerry here. I see a few questions are coming in, but if you can move the slide then to the next thing here. Yeah, so Jerry's going to talk about more of kind of personal tax and corporate tax and kind of what's going on there. So take it over, Jerry.
Okay, so this is a bit of an ice chart, but we'll try to kind of do this in a very expeditious way. When you look at the Biden tax proposal, he's talking about increasing individual tax rates. He's talking about increasing capital gains rates for people with income over $1 million. He's talked about, sort of getting rid of the carried interest capital gains status, limiting itemized deductions. A big one is this payroll tax on wages in excess of $400,000, and eliminating the qualified business income deduction, which is basically a 20% deduction, reduction of your taxes if you're a flow-through type business as to their business owners. That's a big one because we do a lot of planning around this 20% deduction to make sure that clients are eligible for the maximum 20% versus all the limitations that apply there. There's also a discussion about, reducing the exemption, the estate tax exemption, which is, right now 11.7 million, all the way down to 5.5 or 3.5. And so quite frankly, we're working with clients feverishly right now to basically use up those exemptions so that they are sort of grandfathered in, if you will, under those scenarios. Next slide, please. Probably more pertinent to the controller group here is the sort of corporate/business tax planning. And as a result of the CARES Act and recent tax law changes, and also kind of what Biden is contemplating, there's all kinds of planning that is going on right now in the sort of business/corporate arena. Of course, Biden is contemplating increasing the corporate rate from 21% to 28%, but also kind of creating a minimum tax on global book income that's over $100 million. So, there are companies that can shelter their income, like, you've heard of Amazon and these other companies that even though they're doing billions in revenue, they're not paying any taxes. That would sort of eliminate that situation. A big area right now is, is states in terms of sales tax, income tax, local taxes, gross receipts taxes. States are hurting, and so states are really looking hard at ways in which they can tax businesses. And so we are doing a ton of planning with those businesses about how to mitigate those, state and local, whether it be income taxes, sales and use taxes, et cetera. It's a very big value add in terms of tax savings. Another area is international. The tax laws changed a couple years ago to kind of away from what's called a worldwide tax system, where the United States wants to tax worldwide income, to more of a territorial system where you'll sort of only pay tax in that jurisdiction, but it is in a quasi manner. Now, as a result of the CARES Act that already happened a few months ago, there are planning opportunities as a result of that act to sort of improve upon the planning that was done maybe a year ago that was a result of these recent tax law changes. And what I mean by that is, for example, transfer pricing creates these economic arrangements between US companies and foreign corporations, and essentially determines where the profit and where the tax is going to occur. Well, with the pandemic, there might be certain areas where you'd rather have more profits versus less profits because the tax exposure is greater or less. So we're doing a ton of planning in the international area. And then, of course, R&D tax credits, net operating loss limitations. Some of the companies are really losing a lot of money right now. So there's a lot of planning about utilization of the net operating losses in a way that's really powerful and value add. So I guess where I'm going with this all is in the tax arena, there is a ton going on right now. Mm-hmm. And I think, the good news is, with sort of proper planning, there's all kinds of tax savings for clients that are interested in exploring those types of things.
So Jerry, can they find you? They can find you on our website or in LinkedIn, right? If any of our attendees want some more information.
Right, and I think, just to talk about the Biden tax plan for a moment, there's some of these tax law changes are drastic, but with sort of the congressional composition right now, and depending on the outcome of the, Georgia Senate races, you kind of get the feeling that it's going to be rather tough for Biden to push through the tax law changes that he's contemplating. So, which makes planning even more complex, because you kind of say, well, we really, if we knew that that was going to happen, we'd kind of do a certain kind of planning right now, but we don't really know the outcome of that. I will say that, Biden's proposals are pretty drastic in some areas. And so even if, let's say, they won the Georgia races, the Democrats won the Georgia races and controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we wonder whether or not all these changes are really going to be pushed through, because the down ballots went Republican substantially, and so there's not a huge majority on the Democratic side, which could then result in massive changes. So we kind of think that it's it could be status quo or modest changes to the tax laws in
Okay.
2021.
Thanks for your insights. Guys, we've got a few more minutes left to our hour, and we are getting some chat questions in the Q&A there. Thank you. So one question came in about what types of automation should companies be considering? We kind of talked a little bit about that, but Ryan, maybe you can talk more clear-cut examples of what you've seen out there as far as automation.
It's funny. I'd say that the number one questions we get are around AR and AP automation. That a lot of firms have already done things around expense automation and those areas. If you haven't done expense automation, that kind of stuff, then let's do it. AR and AP are the number one that we start with. But then the reality is there's oftentimes a lot more mundane things that we can automate as well, right? There are things. Lindy, you mentioned it, 1099s.
Right.
Stuff that really you doing internally to your business adds very little value, but takes time away from your critical employees' time and effort, right? And so those are the areas we see people starting with the most initially, and then we look at things related to financial close a lot as well,
okay.
and looking at processes around the close as quick hits, most effective, and things that we're seeing most people get traction on. And then getting to the request flows, maybe the PO flows, those kind of things where people, purchasing flows, that would be the next set that we typically look at.
One other thing we've talked about and we've seen in our clients and doing is HR automation.
Mm-hmm.
Controllers are generally getting more involved in that, and employee onboarding and getting a new employee set up in the system.
That's a good point, and our team has spent a lot of time doing the HR automation, and the onboarding is a big one. And to be perfectly honest, the other thing that we're spending time on that we're seeing a lot about is now return to work, is all the tracking and the compliance tracking around getting back to the office, if and when and how all that occurs depending on your region and state. And so we've put together some tools and enablement around that as well for clients.
Yeah, great. I guess there's one last piece of advice here. We're coming up to the top of the hour is, kickstarting this process. I thought you had a great tip on, getting the controller collaborating with other areas. Is this asking questions? Is there a place they can go and find information? Ryan, can they call you? Do we have any sort of a checklist out there, or, a very small engagement to kind of get them going? I mean,
I love it, Lindy. The answer again, a good consulting guy: yes, 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 and reach out anytime. And again, tongue in cheek, I have to say it, but the answer is yes. We do have checklists for that. Yes, there are case studies and examples on the website that we're happy to share with people as well. We can do what we call a baseline benchmarking assessment to come in and kind of help you figure out. Like Jerry said, we've done with a number of clients that he and I've done together, where we come in and say, let's get a sense for where you are today, what's working, what's not, where are you headed in the future, and how do we build a plan for you to tangibly and tactically get some progression moving forward as well.
Great. Well, I really want to thank you guys. Jerry, did you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, one last comment on that is I will tell you that doing those assessments, which basically identify either weaknesses or possible opportunities, the business owners, because they're the ones that call me, were very impressed, because they at least kind of have a picture of what needs to happen, and then kind of how and when all of that happens. And it's relatively inexpensive, quite frankly.
And your sequence to prioritize the actions you're going to take, right?
And they love those, because it was like, they don't know anything about that stuff, right? And so to have kind of a roadmap that kind of helps them say, okay, these are all the things that we need to be thinking about, and then we can just figure out a schedule as to how many we want to tackle, in each year going forward.
Well, and I think, Lindy, you asked how, why would the controller care about that and so forth, is that the reality is a lot of times you do need to build that coalition to get the change too, right? And sometimes, to Jerry's point, is getting other people on board with a plan is where you need to start, right? And doing
I
that
like it.
assessment and getting people's feedback across the organization, where it's not just you saying it by yourself as the controller. The controller, a lot of times, honest time, like Jerry says, they might be the most network person. They might be the person who knows that there's a bunch of problems and a bunch of opportunities, a bunch of areas, but they need to get the people's feedback on paper in a plan that they can show to the CEO, to the owner, to the business owner, to the leadership team, to get everybody to buy in and say, yes, this is what we need to do and what we need to change, right? And so sometimes that is the first step. Get alignment, get engaged, get a plan together and work as a team.
I love it. Love it when a plan comes together. So great advice, input, your expertise on both of you guys shows through. Really appreciate your time today, and thank you to our attendees as well. And hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and take care.
Happy holidays.
All right,
Absolutely.
bye. Happy holidays.